Alright, how's it going, everyone? And thanks for joining me on a new episode of the Music Reviewer Podcast. My name is Josh, and we're doing a new album review today. This is going to be episode 53, covering the latest album from Broadwave, SoulFly. Now, SoulFly was released on March 26th, so not too long ago, late March. Been meaning to get to this album. I've been digging Broadwave's stuff in general since, not since I discovered him this past summer, but really just as I listen more and more to him, I've gained, some respect for how he does his approach to like the R&B and hip hop thing. And kind of had to prepare for this album review regardless because for the other segment of this show, Best and Worst Track of the Week, he had an album bomb that infiltrated the Billboard Hot 100 with quite a few songs. So anyways, kind of wanted to get this review in before I drop that episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week. Just so I can kind of kill two birds with one stone. And honestly, I don't do that for every artist. I could have done that with Justin Bieber last week, but I think Broadwave's good enough and just more interesting to devote a couple episodes to this album. But anyways, just want to let everyone know about some stuff that dropped on the podcast. Last episode of the album review series was over Lana Del Rey's Chemtrails over the Country Club. Had quite a bit of stuff to say on that album. I thought it was an interesting album overall. Different stuff overall in general from Lana. If you want to check out that episode, it's the last album review. Chemtrails over the Country Club from Lana Del Rey. And then also a new episode of Best and Worst Track of the Week dropped a couple days ago for the week of April 3rd. At this point, it's kind of old news, but it's just covering some tracks from... there's a collaborative track from Chris Young and Kane Brown, the Justin Bieber album bomb. If you're interested in what I thought about the Justice album, all the tracks that basically dropped with all the features. A track from Lil TJ, Daniel Caesar, and Giveon, ended up being Broadway versus Justin Bieber. Broadway got the best track of the week. Justin Bieber got worst. Even though the track wasn't, the track was bad, but I mean, could have been a lot worse, I'm thinking. But that best track of the week from Broadwave is a single off of this album we're reviewing right now. So if you wanted just to catch up on the best and worst track of the week series, there you go. And also, if anyone is interested, the Kings of Leon album I did a couple weeks ago is still, kind of freshish. If anyone was interested, I thought that was a pretty decent album as well. So let's go ahead and get into this Broadwave album review. So, Broadwave is still a relatively fresh artist in my opinion, especially from all the artists I've been covering recently. He's, probably one of the newer artists I've covered in some time. It seems like he has been active for a few years, but I really honestly didn't get to really discover the artist until really this past summer when I had to review one of his tracks for Best and Worst Track of the Week. But so just reading a bit into Broadwave, he's an American singer-songwriter and rapper. He's best known for incorporating like rap and hip-hop pretty seamlessly into most of his music. He executes both skills, the rapping and the singing, quite well, but I'd say he's best known for his rich and soulful voice. That definitely stands out in comparison to many contemporaries. And it seems like the progression of Broadwave's career, coming up from just being an independent artist, releasing mixtapes, and then getting a record deal, and then putting out a debut album, and then a commercially successful sophomore album, Pray for Love, and then now a SoulFly, which has been, I would argue, his most commercially successful project, peaking at number one on the Billboard 200 now, and then also with several of the tracks on the album making onto the Hot 100. His progression is actually happening, idealistically, I guess, for any artist. And it's just really awesome to see because he's not like this typical hip-hop or R&B artist that is very heavy on like sex appeal, or I guess materialistic or superficial topics in the music, or even aesthetically. It just seems like it's this is what we've been wanting. A lot of people have been wanting, is an artist like Rod Wave that's just real and authentic, that is progressing and is starting to come up to the top of the game. He's not as big as the mega juggernaut artists like a Drake, but then again, who will ever be bigger than a Drake, honestly? But he's making a name for himself, and it seems like it's being done the right way. Granted, I don't know everything about Rod Wave. I honestly don't know anything about him other than what's available on Wikipedia. But it's nice to see the natural progression of a career taking off for an artist like him. But anyways, let's get more into the music. Pray for Love, the sophomore album. I just wanted to touch on that a bit because I like hearing of the previous project going into a new one, just to kind of have some context. And right off the bat, when I turned that album on, just listening to it, it felt immediately just more raw compared to SoulFly. For instance, the track Fuck the World, it features Rod rapping with an aggressive delivery, which doesn't really happen on SoulFly at all. Thug Life was a bit of an anomaly due to the track just sounding washed out and muffled a bit in the instrumental. It just really seems quite different in terms of the production from other tracks, especially the track before and after it. I think that's something that was noted by other listeners from some comments I read on certain threads. I guess there was a mastering issue. Maybe the tracks were just hodgepodge together. I don't know. But the production just does sound a bit off track to track. The album picks up around No Weakness right after Rags to Riches. For some reason, the production changes, but for the better. The tune just sounds a bit more lively and brighter on spots. Rod's delivery is just more clear and pronounced. The track has an overall nice energy to it. The Greatest incorporates a nice main melodic motif that's executed with lots of attitude by Rod all throughout the track. And the track then transitions to Rod singing some smooth vocal lines that pick up the track even more. Another track, Ribbon in the Sky, features Rod demonstrating his rap chops with a nice flow and energetic presence, also while incorporating vocal lines at the end of some of the rapped lines. It's a solid example of what Rod is good at, just blending the two seamlessly together. And the main pattern I've noticed a lot of Rod's tracks on this project fall into was that a lot of the tracks are just presented as like these very, I guess, one-dimensional vocal ideas that don't really develop that much. Not much verse, chorus, bridge, chorus going on, standard strong structure. This makes some of the run times to be quite short or make the tracks feel a bit incomplete. But overall, the album had its moments. But SoulFly just seems to be like an overall more refined project that's polished, with Rod Wave showing some flashes of growth and maturity. But I will say, SoulFly, it's not a perfect album either. But I think it is an improvement from Pray for Love. Although both projects are respectively decent. SoulFly, first track's just starting off here. The track addresses a sort of like meta topic, like his influence on the youth due to his fame as an artist. Also topics of like death in relation to his friend dying. Typical Rod Wave, song topics and I guess ideas thrown in. The sub bass on this track can be turned up a bit too much. It cuts through everything, causing it to be distracting at times. This does happen at other points in the album as well. But the track, like this, the compositionally, when we get to the SoulFly's refrain that the track builds up to, it, in my opinion, it just doesn't pay off as much as I was hoping for. And as much as it could have, maybe. It's not a bad track. There's some emotional peaks when Rod is belting in the background of the track, but I thought the track just had a bit more potential, especially with the... I've heard Rod execute a hook or refrain better as he's building up to it, such as like something off Letter for Houston. I keep on referencing that track, but it's true. Next track, Gone Till November. I thought this was a decent track as well. The track has a bit of a more sensitive nature to it. There's some light guitar textures on here that make the track more ambient. There's some bright piano melodies all throughout the track that color the track nicely. And Rod's vocals are nicely implemented all throughout, especially when there's more emotional lead parts that combine with the rest of the vocals on the track. Creates some decent moments on there. I thought this was a good track. Didn't think we got much of a highlight until the next track, Don't Forget, which honestly, this is probably one of the best Rod Wave tracks of all time. In my opinion, the best track on this album. I dig the hooky melodic ideas Rod throws in on this track. This track features a lot of Rod's rapping. It's smooth, the flow smooth. There's a nice delivery all throughout. Some nice embellishing vocal runs all throughout this track, with the most catchy and concise track I've heard on this album thus far, and I think it's pretty much throughout the whole album. This takes the cake. The track has a nice groove. The bass hits are spaced out nicely. Topically on the song, it's kind of a nice call out to the rap game, addressing topics of the shallow nature of the hip hop game, the stupid, I guess, topics in a lot of tracks, and Pimp C. There's a vocal snippet I think he did in an interview, possibly, of him calling out the rap game, pretty much enhancing this track about the shallow nature of certain beef and just the lack of positive energy, I guess, in hip-hop that's been going on forever. But anyways, yeah, a great track, Don't Forget. Tombstone, another great track. I covered it on Best and Worst Track of the Week. This track, in the context of the album, it's nice. It has my ideas haven't changed. It features the typical subdued Rod Wave nature with the soft vocal tone, and I'll say it again, the gospel vocals are executed perfectly on here. I usually don't like gospel vocals implemented into tracks. It's usually gimmickly, but here it's tastefully used. Lovely falsetto runs from Rod. Honestly, this isn't exactly revelational when it comes to like Rod Wave stuff. I will say it's exactly what you'd expect to hear from a Rod Wave tune, but it's executed nicely. The lyrical content is sobering. It has a sobering tone to it as well, about struggling all throughout your life. And it keeps the constant charm. Not a bad track. Next track, All I Got. I thought this was a good track as well, especially to follow Tombstone. There's a lush intro section with electric guitar runs and spaced out piano chords. I love the little melodic interludes, embellishing the track all throughout. It's more of an emotional, softer R&B track. Rod's soft and smooth vocal tone obviously works well over this. It's a good track. The vocal snippet on here is a bit unusual, though. I will say I think it isn't implemented as I guess tastefully as other parts, on other tracks, but it's there. I think it just goes on for a bit. Richer featuring Polo G. Honestly, I thought that track was okay. I thought Polo G did a solid job, but I think I covered it on one of the episodes of Best and Worst Track of the Week. Didn't quite find it to be that much of a highlight. Street Runner, another track I thought was great. Covered on Best and Worst Track of the Week as well, but it obviously got Best Track of the Week that week too. Typical Rod Wave vocal stylizations. The soft color on his voice is present, and it's nice. There's some nice melodic piano instrumentation that's present. It's a good touch to the track. Rod's vocals just kind of float all throughout the track nicely. The piano on this track has a light nature to it. It floats all throughout the track. The track is a bit anticlimactic, but it's not bad. It kind of reminds you of Letter from Houston. The elongated voicemail message is a bit dragged out, though, too. Pills and Bills, honestly, this track could have been better, in my opinion. It kind of suffers from the underdeveloped nature a lot of the tracks from the previous album had. But honestly, this track kind of acts like a bit of a marker. The album, honestly, doesn't really pick up from here. A lot of it just sounds like filler from here on out. This track does have a bit more of an energetic and upbeat presence to it. It sounds really interesting with the synth melodies faintly in the background. That really colors the track quite nicely. It's a good track. It's very straightforward, though, but Rod's rapping is executed with a nice flow and presence. Next couple of tracks, honestly, I didn't find to be that interesting in terms of highlights. OMDB I thought was interesting, though. There's a mid to late 2000s R&B charm to it. There's a deep and warm bass line that fits in well in this track, and it accompanies the track quite nicely when it's added. It could have used more of that, honestly. I dig the adding of the embellished backing vocals on this track. It gives this track a lot more character. And then also, there's just some interesting textures all throughout the track with like some palm muted guitar stuff thrown in. Not a bad track overall. A couple tracks after, on Calling, in my opinion, the reason I'm bringing this track up is just by the time I'm at this point, the track is maybe sounding a bit recycled or homogenous by this point, and Rod's vocals are quite good still on this track. They're quite smooth, but the track lacks something to make it stick out in the context of the album. Sneaky Links I thought was interesting, just because the track does kind of have its own unique nature to it. It's murky and dark. The track feels like it's missing a rap verse, though, due to how spaced out it is naturally. But this whole aesthetic, the murky and darkness to it, is executed quite nicely. It's not bad, but I thought it was missing some elements to it. Next track, Believe Me. Honestly, same issues as I had with Calling. It has trouble standing out in the context of the album, but it obviously follows the typical Rod Wave style. It's just very meh on it. And then moving on, by the time we're towards the end of the album. I like this track, though. It confronts some difficult topics for Rod Wave. There is a nice hopeful mood to this track. It kind of is reminiscent of some material from the 90s, with the style on this bright piano instrumental that makes the track quite lush. It kind of has the same mood as like Tupac's Changes, but obviously it's not executed in the same way at all with Rod Wave on here. But I thought that was interesting, and it's a nice moment to have towards the end of the album, especially since it's a bit lackluster towards the end. And the next track, Changing, is the end of the album. I like that it addresses mental health. It's a bit emo. It's not bad, but honestly, the second time I listened to it, or second or third time, I just couldn't really get into it. I thought I needed some more listens, but yeah, it just really isn't that all that interesting in comparison to the other highlights on this album. And by the time I'm here, I'm glad I listened to this project. I thought there was a lot of great stuff that went on here. I think I'd probably have one of my favorite tracks of the year, or in some time, off of this with Don't Forget. And then there's some great tracks that I've come to discover that I'll dig pretty much until I don't care about Rod Wave anymore. Gone Till November, Tombstone, Street Runner. Just some nice moments overall. Also, Moving On wasn't bad as well. Like I said, I thought it was an improvement in comparison to Pray for Love. This album didn't have like the technical production issues that album did, although there are some questioning choices, especially with how crazy high that sub bass is mixed in. It really cuts through some nice instrumental melodies and textures at times, but yeah, that really wasn't that big of an issue. I think what suffers is the lack of ideas towards the latter half of the album, when a lot of it sounds like filler or just very homogenous. Like these were just ideas thrown on, but they weren't really developed to their full potential. But still, I dig the album. Like Rod Wave, it's really hard for Rod Wave, I think, to make something that's really bad, and I think that's a good thing. Eventually there might have to be something different from track to track to really justify putting this many tracks on an album, especially when some of them really don't stick out. But yeah, that's just my opinion. If I had to rate this album, probably give it a 6 out of 10. So yeah, I'd say I enjoyed it about as much as like some recent things I've heard. I definitely liked it more than the last Lana album. I don't know if that's saying much. More than the Julian Baker album. I thought this was just good. I really thought it had potential to be better or perhaps great, and I think there's potential for Rod Wave to definitely do that, and I'm hopeful that it will happen and that I'll be able to enjoy his music for years to come. But anyways, Yeah, that's just my opinion. I think you'll definitely dig this album if you're familiar with Rod Wave and you're favorable towards him. If you're just into hip hop and R&B, there's some stuff on here that I'm sure a lot of hip hop and R&B listeners will dig. I don't really know who would dislike this. Perhaps people that are more into hearing trap bangers with auto-tune crooning. Not really any of this going on, so that perhaps this won't be your cup of tea if you're more into that. The Lil Uzi Vert or Travis Scott listeners, perhaps, probably. I'm not saying they can't get into this, but this really doesn't have any of those qualities from that side of the hip hop spectrum. But anyways, that's what makes music great. There's different varieties within genres. But yeah, if you listen to the end of this review, thanks for joining me on this album review. Again, my name's Josh. I'm a music reviewer. If you're listening on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you dug the podcast, listen to other episodes. Leave some feedback, good or bad, if you didn't dig the podcast. Or subscribe on your desired listening streaming service if you listen that way. But anyways, take care of yourselves. I'll see y'all later.